Are you looking for a place to meet like-minded people? Perhaps you're a light worker looking for a safe place to share your thoughts and services. We've got a place for you, IntuiTalks.com. Join for free, post updates, blogs, create and join groups via website or radio or class package. The possibilities are endless. Join the All Spiritual, all under one roof network, www.IntuiTalks.com.
And welcome everybody to Altered States. It's our second show with Kathleen and myself, and we are looking at psychic development today, so that should be quite exciting, and we're quite sure to run in the face of a few set opinions, and the amount of falsehoods out there is phenomenal. Usually the biggest problem around falsehoods when it comes to psychic development are people who haven't developed their own skills, placing themselves in the position of teachers, tutors, people who have limited skills, who think that whatever their skill set is the top of the game, is the top of the range, and nobody else could do any better than they can, which is a little egotistical. But I'm going to bring on my co-host, Kathleen, and as soon as I can get her mic actually working, there we go. Hello, Kathleen. Welcome to another show.
Hello, Dorothy. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And it's very good to have you here because I've been looking forward to this for 2 whole weeks.
I know. I'm looking forward to it as well. I know we have some pretty stiff competition right now with the debate. The debate.
Look, I tell you what, you know, we in New Zealand, we're just coming up to Labour weekend as well, so lots of people are going on holidays. Having said that, you know, I've got to say the debate is not competition anywhere outside of the States. It's just not.
True. That's true.
We just don't care enough. You know, we've got our own pollies and our own problems and so on and so on. So that as soon as we all learned who your candidates were, we lost interest right there and then, because it's called a pretend. What I call a pretend election. That is when both parties, nobody really cares about, nobody wants, but that's
right.
all they've put forward. And when they've done that, it tells you that Congress and your senators, they're running your country, and the figurehead is irrelevant to anybody. So we can walk past that. What is really interesting to me, and I think I just let you know, you'll be very pleased to know, we've actually been getting a lot of listens on Spreaker. We're getting a lot of on-demand listens. So for anybody who is running shows and not too sure about your live count, and I know on IntuiTalks you can't check. You can check how many have gone to your show page, but not necessarily how many are listening to your shows. One of the things to take on board is why you're doing it. And I'm doing it here to share knowledge. Kathleen is here to share her knowledge and experience as well. Both of us have got a few years tanked up in there. And to answer questions if you've got them. The reading side of it is pretty close. Absolutely. The reading side of it is pretty close to you know, a non-event as such, in general, because we both, well, I don't know about you. Did you ever do BTR, Blog Talk?
I have. I haven't done, I had one show, I've been a guest on several BTR shows, but I only did one show of my own, and I'm not very tech savvy, but I'm getting there. I'm learning. So it's just like we're going to be teaching tonight. I need somebody to help me with that. So I'm really excited about Spreaker though, and people listening and how that's working and stuff. It's just fascinating to me how it can stretch over so much. It's so cool.
Well, the beauty of the recordings is, of course, having on-demand episodes, and a lot of people in New Zealand, whether we like it or not in Australia, this is our work day. It's the middle of the day. It's 2:30 in the afternoon. So everybody's at work. Everybody I know is at work. And so they come in and listen later, or they find their time to listen, you know, on the weekend. And so it's that genre, you know, the whole online genre now. It used to be, when I first started having shows on BTR, it was 2007, which is quite a long time ago. And one of the big things noticeable about it at the time was, you know, live shows were everything. Nobody really liked listening to on demand. It was all about the community. It was all about the chats. You know, it was all about that side of things. And that's gone so far away now. The chats can be so nasty. The people can be so competitive. And you'll get this whole new, over the years, I've watched it twist from honest, good fun shows to people just trying to grab business, using the shows to grab business, which makes it a very long advertisement for most people. And of course, because anybody can do it, you don't have to actually be skilled, you don't have to be qualified. So it's an interesting change to the way things have gone. So from the narrower side of that, we're in this wonderful environment now where we can say we're putting this out there, and of course I put it on YouTube, it goes on to Google, as you know, it goes into all of these other spaces. Kiwi 6, we get lots of listens on Kiwi 6, and I have to actually go and look at them to see what we've done. And so to be honest, it's a show. It's not anything else, and as such, the idea is to get the listens, and if there's business that comes out of that, fine. But many years ago, I decided it's more of a hobby than a business creator. I get my business from my website, and I'm sure you do too, word of mouth, all of that kind of thing. So this is just a free sharing environment. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I do. I agree with that, and it's fun. I like the fact that it's about getting together and connecting and teaching each other and talking, and I have a great time with it. I do look at it more as I wouldn't look at it as to drum up business. No, I think that this is about sharing knowledge and sharing common interest in like-minded people and stuff, and I really enjoy doing it. So, but I agree with you. I'm not. I don't know. It's not. I don't want to make it sound like a strict. I think people that do it as a business, it becomes very strict, and like you said, there's a lot of underlying tones. I call it the passive aggressive internet. The passive aggressive internet. People are very aggressive on the internet, and then when I never go and talk to 5 or 6 people to find out, this is what happened. I go straight to private message, and I'll be like, I'm not sure what you meant by that or this or that, because that's what I would do if we were in a situation that, we were physically in the same room. So I just, I find there's a lot of passive aggressive internet. I just try to avoid that because I think there's a difference between sharing knowledge and controlling knowledge. And
exactly. And wouldn't you agree that if you're in a particular profession, like this is my profession and it's your profession, that when you share information on that level, forgetting, anything else, and in particular Facebook, which is like the troll's heaven, the troll is heaven. Forgetting that, talking about our own skill sets and what we do as a profession, which is psychic, clairvoyant, that kind of thing. And of course, I've got the hypnotherapy thing as well. But on that basis, there's a level of expertise that should be coming through, when you are putting yourself forward as a professional and an expert in your field. Would that be, a fair comment?
Absolutely. Yes.
And I think the Open Radio Network over the years has really shown us that there are, because you can just do that and because you don't have to pay to do that, there are a lot of people out there who are just really talking crap. And that's what we're about tonight. So we are leading into people. That's what we're about tonight. What we're about is the fact that when it comes to psychic development, there are beautiful, beautiful, wonderful, exciting, ecstatic, in my experience in the past, moments. And there are challenging moments. There are emotional moments. If you are going to develop spiritually, not just psychic information, but if you're going to develop spiritually, there's a certain amount of cringe element as you start recognizing the very things that you have been doing in your life, because there is no point that anybody can set themselves up as a person to teach others without having experienced a level of self-honesty or self-honesty, self-awareness, understanding yourself. You don't have to be perfect, but you do need to know where you're at, what you're doing, what you've been doing, so that you can recognize in others without necessarily an air of superiority, right? Would you put that differently, Kathleen?
No, I agree with that, and I think that a good teacher also recognizes their strengths and weaknesses as well. That we're always learning, that we can always learn from each other. I do have. I have a few different opinions on that. I feel that sometimes, like you mentioned earlier, people are like, oh, okay, I did this really great thing and now I'm psychic and they're giving all this advice and they're doing, and it has to be taken with responsibility. You are, spiritually connecting with somebody, which is a much higher vibrational level than just having a conversation with them. And I do think there's a big difference between the industry and the community. And in the industry, I feel there's a lot of hokey people.
Well, it's true. It's true. And the whole thing, and that's not just on the internet either, right? That's in person. There's a lot less emphasis on a person knowing what they're doing, actually, than there ever has been before. Back in the day, there was a lot less of it going on. So a person, their reputation was earned by being good at what they did, whereas now you can just market your way into the industry. You can just start a show. You can just go and set up a website. You don't have to have any skills to do that. And while that's not in itself a terrible thing, it's to be noted for those seeking advice. But in particular, we're talking to people tonight that are developing themselves. Then it's really important for them to understand that the person that's teaching them needs to know more than they know, right?
Absolutely, yes.
You know, you can't teach otherwise. So spiritual development is not personal development per se. So when you're wanting to personally develop, go to a qualified person for that in every way, shape or form, whether it's a hypnotherapist, whether it's a psychic clairvoyant, whether it's a life coach. That's personal development territory. But if you want to spiritually develop, then you can't do that with a person who's running on empty. You just can't do it. They need to have wisdom, I suppose. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Wisdom and experience. I think that they have to have experience. And, I've had many people that are, I know I'm, the last 5 years it's become very mainstream. So we have these, and this is, the community. It's how do you prove that you have the ability and you don't? And I have a lot of people that say, well, do you think everybody has the ability? Does everybody says they're psychic. And I said, everybody has a sixth sense. I said, if everybody could do what I do or people in this community, nothing would get done in the physical world. So,
well, there's the other side of that. Would you agree too that while everybody, it's like I can paint walls, and I can do paintings, but I just want to do paintings. I'll hire somebody to paint my wall.
Right.
Because that's their skill set. They know how to do that better. Just as hiring a stopper or a woodworker, they've got their skill set, and I'm happy to pay them to use that skill set. Doesn't mean I can't do it to a certain extent, but can I do it the way they do it? In the advisory field, where you've got counselors, where you've got psychotherapists, where you've got psychics, the combination of psychotherapy and psychic is actually vital to giving good advice. Life advice and helping a person through grief. I've seen psychics that are very good as far as getting information that are absolutely awful on the radio, and I've seen this a whole lot online, absolutely awful at giving life advice, actually.
Yes.
I've lost count of how many times a girl or a woman in particular has called in absolutely distressed in a relationship, and the psychic's just turned around and said, kick him to the curb, and I'm like, what the hell? That's such a harsh way to go, and it's more about I'm a woman and that makes men are arseholes than it's got anything to do with psychic or spiritual advising. So from that perspective, we move to psychic development. What do you think when a person's learning, they get all sorts of stuff, and let's face it, we've all been there, and when you're in that position, you get a whole pile of random stuff because you've basically opened up to a subtle energy field of information. So the subtle field of information doesn't have full stops or commas. It doesn't have a sentence, and it doesn't have a beginning and an end. It's conceptual. There's images, there's sounds, there's sense. But because you haven't got a physical thing in front of you, your brain isn't quite as ready or able to put it into context. So for that, what would you see as, for those that you've helped through or the people you've watched coming through or taught yourself, what would be the biggest challenge when receiving information right at the outset, at the very beginning?
Listening and trying, listening. People try to make sense of, because it can come to you in many different ways. It can come to you in the form of a feeling. It can come to you in the form of an image. It can come to you in the form of a feeling like a tingling sensation or a smell. It's listening and being receptive to it. So many people, like you said, put the physical form in front and okay, I have to touch it, see it, smell it, hear it, and I have to put all the five senses together and have the scientific. So then they put the physical aspect into it and they brush it off. It's listening into that knowing. I think that we're taught at a very young age that the more information you have, the more real it is. And I don't think that's necessarily true when it comes to psychic development. I think your psychic development gives you exactly what you need. It's not in the physical world, so it doesn't give you the filler. It doesn't give you, yeah, we should turn left because that's, the scenic route and we have extra time today. It just says go left. And we often expect to have more, in the 70s and 80s, they always used the term, something told me not to get on the plane. Don't get on the plane. And everybody assumed it's because the plane was going to crash or the plane crashed. Sometimes it's just because you didn't want to get stuck in a snowstorm in Chicago for 4 days.
Right.
So
right.
It's about listening. It's about listening, and sometimes you don't get all the information you need right away. There's a bigger picture. So
right. Well, that's the word concept, isn't it? So the information tends to come to you in a conceptual form, which is very holistic. And when you're trying to direct a particular piece of information, in particular for somebody else, but harder for yourself because you're emotionally invested, then of course you need to break down the relevant parts. Correct?
Yes. And you have to figure out, and yeah. When you get that, sometimes it comes metaphorically. Sometimes I'll see images metaphorically and I understand what the message is because of the metaphoric picture I get or information. It's not black and white.
Sorry. Yeah. No, it's not black and white. Sorry, I thought you'd finished there. The thing that, because over the years I've taught so many, and especially with vibration expansion technique, I'm teaching practitioners more than I'm teaching self-development outside of my, programs. One of the main things that I've always seen as an issue is that word interpretation, is a really big issue, because if you're reading for somebody else, and you see, now don't laugh at me for using this, all right? If you see a fishing rod, if you see a fishing rod, what it means to that person and why you are seeing is relevant as opposed to what it means to you, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And so when you put your own spin on that, when you're learning, you do this, so I'm not picking on anybody. We all did it. We've all done it. And so now and again, we still do it, but we try not to. When you put your own spin on that, your own interpretation, for me, if I saw a fishing rod, I'd be, okay? And then, of course, if I'm seeing that for somebody else, that could be metaphoric, which is where I was going with that. It may not be an actual fishing rod for that person. So then it becomes that interpretive, looking at around it, feeling forward. There's a whole pile of energetic information. It's not just a picture. If I just look at that picture, I'm only going to get one tiny wee piece of a very large puzzle. And so we need to understand that if we're developing psychically for ourselves, for fun, we are doing something different to spiritual development. They are not the same thing. And I think that's important as well. One can lead to the other.
Yes.
But they're not necessarily the same thing. So you can develop a skill set of, say, reading visionary information, right? Without developing spiritually at all. You could still start a bitch and finish a bitch, right?
Absolutely.
And that's a powerful thing to understand, that the ability to do or to interpret psychic information is not necessarily making you a good advisor or a good person, or doesn't make you spiritually superior in any way, shape, or form. And you don't need to be. If you can advise well, the rest doesn't really matter, I don't think. Because we used to see this lady in shows. And she was what I call, we were immature. I'm an adult, and I was working at these shows with my Aura camera, and we called her Scary Lady. Because they're so immature. And she had the biggest boobs I've ever seen on anybody in my whole wide life, And her boobs would heave, and she wore black, and she had this deep cleavage, and she was wrinkly because she was old. She had the blackest eyeliner on, so her eyes sort of popped out at you. And she had dingle-dangles everywhere. She had bracelets that clink-clanged, and she had necklaces. She had pendulums that were swinging all over the place every time she breathed. She had a funny little hat on, and she was aiming for the old gypsy look, you know. And
sure.
she had on her counter in front of her site, she had crystal balls. She had 7 or 8 different crystal balls. And she would look at you as you went past. You could see her whole thing was a performance. And that's what it was. It was a performance. The way she held herself, the way she spoke was a performance. Now, I mean, that was a few years ago, and we're getting to the end of that. We're getting to where people walk past because, as you said, it's more mainstream. You'd look at that now and you go, yeah, nah, I don't think so. That's pure entertainment, what she was doing. And she would grab your hand, for example, and freak you out, you know, because you're just standing there. Next thing, this chick's grabbed your hand and she's pulled it in front of her face. Pretty funny. And we used to have an Indian chap who would walk around the shows, and he would just put his hand on somebody's shoulder and say, do you know blah, blah? Very often, the name would ring true. I don't know what he would do. And he says, if you want information for them, I've got information for them. And I can remember when he did it to a friend of mine, and she turned around and says, well, I'll send Joe here, because he'd said, do you know somebody called Joe? And her sister was called Joe. Not a little thing, you know, so he's on point. But he'd taken that single skill and didn't have a lot to back it up with. But he could get the sister's name or the brother's name, or he could get these names, but he wasn't getting that person's name. So he's basically saying, come and pay me and I'll tell you somebody else's stuff.
Right.
You know, yeah, it's a little bit of a flawed plan as I saw it, and he disappeared over time. But I've seen so much of it over the years. That doesn't mean they're good or bad at what they do, by the way, but it does mean that they are more performance than, because you could get away with it back then. You know, you could get away with it, whereas today you really can't, you know.
Right. Performance, I call it performance oriented. I remember, I would go to these psychic fairs forever, and I would ask for a lot of help when I was younger. I'm what I refer to as self-taught. I've had some great advice over the years, but every time I tried to find something where I could be taught, I didn't find anything that resonated with me. The teachers were very, like I said, there was a difference between controlling knowledge and sharing knowledge. Right. So what I started doing was I bought you know, and everybody says it's bad to buy yourself a tarot deck and do all that, but I bought my first tarot deck when I was a preteen, and I thought, oh, I have to memorize this book, and I couldn't, and it didn't make sense to me, and it didn't resonate with me. So I threw the book away, and I started, and I always suggest this to people. I started with a deck that spoke to me. I still have that deck. It's the one I use when I do use tarot cards. It's old, it's worn, it's like a security blanket to me. But when I started reading with them, I took a notebook and I threw the book away that came with the cards, and I started writing down what my interpretation, what came to my head when I looked at the picture, what I thought they meant, one at a time. And then I started doing little spreads and did my own spread and wrote down what I thought it all meant together. And that's how I learned. And I think it's like anything, with practice, you're going to get better. You don't become this beautiful, psychic, amazing reader overnight. It's just like any ability. A surgeon might naturally be good at it, being a surgeon, but he still has to practice. He still has to learn. He still has to, put in the hours. And I feel that in like I said, between the community and the industry here, a lot of people think, well, I bought a tarot deck and I've been right 9 out of 10 times with my friends, so now I'm psychic. And that's just not true. Sometimes it's, yes, we all have connection to the ability, but what are you doing to enhance that? What are you doing for it to grow? I started out as an animal communicator. I mean, I have always seen the dead. Or what the physical world would call the dead. I have always seen spirit, but I was really connected to earth and animals. In fact, I preferred to be with nature and animals over physical beings for a long time, for a large part of my life, because I felt connected. I felt like it was right. None of them were telling me I was wrong. And an animal, if it doesn't like you, it bites you. There's no face that says I like you and then turn around and it be something else. Mm-hmm. So it's been, I think that, and then I said, if I do this and I start to move forward and I started to listen to my spirit guide more and really get into it, and I love it. I love it. Like every day I'm still like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I think that's a big part of it too. But I vowed, if anybody, I'll teach you. I'll help you. I'll do anything I can. But what works for me might not work for you. So I might not be the teacher for you, but I can give you my advice and teach you what I know and how I do it. Everybody does it differently. But like I said, I think with anything, an ability you have to practice, and you'll get better and better at it. The more you practice, the more time you spend with it. And I agree with you with the showmanship. I've been to so many psychic fairs. I had a friend that bought me a crystal ball. And for the longest time, I was like, every time I looked into it, I started giggling. Because I'm like,
good to see yourself in it, mate.
Yeah. And I'm like, why can't I read with these? Why is everybody, I'm expecting smoke. Because it was a clear crystal ball, I'm expecting all this stuff, all this showman stuff that people have said. I've been to 100 psychic fairs over the years and things like that. And everybody always had it covered in velvet and these silks and made it so. And I asked this one lady, she had this beautiful, really large crystal ball, and she had it covered up. And I said, can I ask you? She seemed so friendly. She seemed so nice. But she was a showman too. She had all the bracelets on and stuff, but she was just seemed so warm. So I went over to her and I said, can I ask a question? I said, I also read, but I said, I was given the gift of a crystal ball, and I said, I'm having trouble with that. Maybe it's that I don't connect. Is it, why do you keep it covered up? Can you give me some information? She says, oh, darling, sit down and I'll tell you all about it. And I sat down and we were having this wonderful conversation. She's like, now I keep the crystal ball covered because other people that have other crystal balls throughout the world can scry and connect with this crystal ball and then invade my privacy or see where I'm at, and told me all this. And all of a sudden I'm like, what? Yeah. So I'm thinking, well, oh my gosh, I've left my crystal ball uncovered all this time. I'm wondering who's in my house now. And then
it's a horror story, yeah.
Yes, and then when I started researching it more, it's because it's a big giant magnifying glass. Show lights will make it hot, and and it'll explode. It'll catch things on fire. Right. Yes. So all these years, I was walking around these shows thinking it was this magical, whoa kind of thing, and there was something wrong with me that I couldn't do it, and oh my gosh, how many people invaded my privacy without me knowing, and I even know it didn't resonate with it. It was true with me, but I was like, I don't know. I have absolutely zero experience with the crystal ball. And that's what bothers me is because she knew, because I asked her. I said, I have a crystal ball and I have no idea what to do with it. Why do you keep it covered up? What do you do? How do you care for it? And she went into this so she already had the information she needed from me to make it sound like it was, that she was above me and knew something that I didn't, and then made it into something it wasn't.
So at the end of that, you're talking about somebody taking advantage of your ignorance, right, as opposed to assisting you, teaching you, showing you. She wanted to be elite, and she wanted to be in an elite group. And while I do agree that a person should learn their craft, if you're going to sell your services, you better know what you're doing. And if you don't, and I hear of you, the chances are really good. If I'm in a position to, I will draw blood. It's something I personally dislike, the dishonesty of all of that. There's that whole energy that you're talking about, so I'm really glad you brought it up, because we will talk about crystal balls. This is about psychic development. So let's start with the realities. Crystal balls were never clear, ever. So a clear
No.
crystal ball is going to be the hardest thing to read, because what you're going to really have to do is you're going to have psychic visions, and you're just using the ball as a point of focus.
Yes.
If you want to scry, they were always, what they originally did, they didn't often have spheres back in the day. You think about how they're machined now. They would have a crystal, and they would polish a part of it. And as
Yes.
they polished those, the crystal inclusions, the inside bubbles, everything that goes on inside a crystal are the scrying tools, the patterns that they see, those kind of things. So it's in a similar vein of reading tea leaves or reading coffee granules and all of that sort of thing. Fun, love it, love it, love it, love it. But now, see, they make all these perfect glass crystals and color them, and then expect people that are told that, well, this is what you read, it's a crystal ball. Well, it's not really, it's a glass sphere. It's not even a crystal. So while that's not in itself a problem, anybody that can't read one, because the reason this is interesting is it came up with Lindsay Harrison. And in the free reading section on IntuiTalks, it's a group, anybody can join it, go on in and join that. You can ask a question, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, in there, she put a picture of a crystal, and I was reading their crystal balls that they'd chosen. I was actually reading the photos of them, so I couldn't look at them proper. And she showed me this one, and she said I could never read it, and Kathy gave it to me, Kathy Bradshaw gave it to me. We couldn't get any information. She couldn't read it, and she was facing the same thing you were, that they're actually not for reading, really. They're for show.
Yes. And I've used mine for a focal point, but I really prefer the crystals that have different colors in them, that are natural crystals like ocean jasper, labradorite, and that kind of stuff, because you can actually see, it's like looking at clouds, or when you put creamer in your coffee, you'll see that cloud, and you can see visions that'll come up, and like you said, the tea leaves and stuff. The clear crystals, I believe, are beautiful for show. Mine are part of my collection for beauty because they're very crisp and clean. But no, I've never had luck with reading with the clear ones. I just giggle every time. I feel like I should have a babushka on.
I know that's exactly why. You can see yourself in there. It's sort of like looking in the mirror and trying to get information. And when you look at yourself, we are all, unless we're incredibly vain and love how we look, we're all a little bit self-conscious, aren't we, about looking at ourselves, especially if somebody else is sitting there watching you do it. So that's really good, and I think that's valuable information. So for anybody that's wanting to develop and you want to use scrying, I love scrying. There's a couple of ways you can go around it. You can buy a real crystal ball, and you sell them, don't you? Do you?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
So we'll pop this next picture up there so everybody can see it. You can pop along to Kathleen's website. I've made it new. This picture, I've done it. Did I choose it or not choose it?
Yes, there I am.
Yes, I did. There you am. Close that. And I changed it to match your website colour. Or the top of your colour. So that's a clickable link there, kathleen-moore-psychicmedium.com. Once we've gone, you'll have to copy-paste it, so we'll probably pop it into the chat there so you can click it there. The links stay live in the archive except for on the pictures, but that's live during the show. Now, you can pop along there and you can have a look. Do you sell scrying stones as well, or do you know what they are?
I don't. I have palm stones, and some people have told me that they use them for scrying, but I myself am not familiar with scrying stones.
Okay, so just say for everybody, I can see my S has gone winged out there, so I have to adjust this for the upload. You see, I'm doing now the inventory spot check of your poster there, which I'm thinking, I'm criticising my work. The scrying stones, so that everybody else knows, because this is for everybody else to work out, they've been sandblasted. So they usually, you're going to have a quartz crystal of some sort, not something that you can't see through. They've got a semi-transparent or opacity. And so when you start looking through those, you'll find that they're sandblasted, and then they slice off one side and highly polish it. And so when you look into it, you can't see through it as such because of the sandblasting, but they are beautiful. I recommend that the larger they are, that you can buy or that you have a variety of them are the best. And when you look into them, you can see quite a lot in them. They're like looking into a static pond, if you like. And of course you can turn them around and, view them upside down. You can't look into the back or the top or the bottom, but the actual front is like a clear, polished up area so you can look into the crystal. When they are larger crystals, they are in fact much nicer to read, but you can hold them if you like, but they're not necessarily a sphere or a crystal sphere. So I think that's a lovely way to go if you're into scrying. Scrying is probably one of the best ways to develop your understanding. And I want to talk about inner vocabularies or spiritual vocabularies. Do you ever use that term?
Yes.
And so what recommendations do you have for somebody who's because it's when I say vocabulary too, there's also an inventory. That is to say, if I see a picture in my mind and it's like a present, right, and the present has a bow on it or whatever, that means something to me for the reading because it's that hypothetical thing, right? If I see one that looks very real and it's in an environment, then I know it's the other person and it's something that's going to happen for them rather than me to interpret. So I call that my inner vocabulary. It's an inventory of symbolism that's personal to me. And when it's not personal to me, then it's their image that I know I'm seeing, say remote viewing, looking into a location somewhere else. Other than my own mind, if you like, and interpreting the beam of information coming at me. So to develop that, what would you recommend for people that are learning?
Well, to develop the vocabulary, I tell people you should always, I call it the psychic journal. I said you should always keep, like, you used to be able to get these little notebooks, and some people do it on their phones now, where you have your notebook on your phone where you can, record it. I record what I see. I do what I call remote writing. I sit down and I will take time and I'll be like, show me what I need to see. And sometimes even now I'll show me what I need to see for, Elaine. And then I'll see images that come and I'll start to write them down. And then I can start to discern the vocabulary of what I'm being told. Is this a message for me or is it a message for Elaine, and how I'm separating that? I do see it like a photograph in my head because that's what made sense to me as a child. And I think we all actually connect to something. So when we do receive our messages, it's something that we're comfortable with. Some people said they hear it. They hear it like a whispering, or they hear music, or they like my husband, who's highly intuitive as well. He hears music in his head all the time. He always hears songs in his head. The songs always correlate with what he's going through or with what's going on with the people he's with. And he says it's so weird because they're popular songs, but they almost always mean something with what's going on in his life at the time, or what he's dealing with or helping somebody else through. And that's what you have to figure out. Is this, I call it gossip, psychic gossip. Is this psychic gossip or is this an actual message? So
it's true. Yeah, it's true. And because when I was learning, and these are the myths sort of thing. When I was learning, one of my teachers, and I did go to classes, I went to mediumship classes, which were really not mediumship classes. I don't believe you can teach a person to be a medium or a psychic. You can develop the abilities you already have. If you don't care about other people, you're not going to get far. Right. That's really how I see that. Would you? Do you think that's a bit harsh, or?
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, because you'll always interpret anything within your own life and your own structure, which will totally miss the other person's requirement. And that being outside of yourself when you're reading somebody else's energy is vital to being, one, a good reader, but two, a good advisor, that you're working with what that person's capable of, what their needs are. And sure, you're going to have your own spin on certain things, your own style, but it should always be for them. It's that kind of an industry, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to the myths, I was told early on when I was doing my mediumship classes, because the lady herself, I was told and taught, we were all taught, she ran classes all the time. There were always 10 people in her classes. We were taught about psychic attacks. She was telling us that you can be psychically attacked and you could lose your mind, by not doing the right things. Now, I'm absolutely a big fat no on that, but what's your take on it?
I don't necessarily believe, I don't know how to put what I believe with that. I have a lot of people that will come to me and they're like, I need to, how do I protect myself? How do I stop negative energy from coming in? I feel that, that psychic attack is a term that was brought up, many years ago to again separate people like they had something other people didn't have. It's why I don't like to use the term gift, because I don't think this is a gift. I think it's an ability. And
totally
everybody has abilities. And I do think that the term psychic attack was used just like, certain religions have, demons or devils. It's something to instill fear. And I think that somebody can attack you with negative energy and throw energy at you, jealousy and dislike and that kind of stuff. But I don't think somebody's going to get worm into your brain and your psyche. And when you're trying to read and take away your sanity like that, to me, that is a fear monger.
I totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. And these are the things that put me off the teachers of the day, if you like. But there's also that aspect that by teaching, individuals that fear, that's very much a religious thing, isn't it? They're brought up with, you've got a good and you've got the evil, and we've got to have that, and they don't like you taking it away from them. We want good and evil. We don't want to call ourselves religious. We want to call ourselves spiritual. We want to say God is everything, and that's okay, but make up your minds. I'm of that ilk. Make up your mind. When it comes to psychic attacks, I really do think that people can make you feel bad, but it's not a psychic attack. In any situation, if you've done something wrong, or if you've had a fight with somebody, or if you've had an out with somebody, the chances are you know where you're at with that, and you're not going to feel good, right? And you can be left with it for 3 or 4 days. I have a friend, Carolyn, who always cracks me up. In this particular case, which she did a lot, she'd made a bit of a faux pas. As the days went by, she started feeling worse and worse and worse about it. And nobody else knew, though, you see. And this is a big deal. And then she said to me, this is just, I've got to go and tell them because it's preying on my mind. I said, nothing's changed. The same thing you did wrong 3 days ago, the same thing. It's not got worse. It's not increasing. It's not getting worse. So really we do that to ourselves, I think. If we feel guilty, we can build things up in our mind. I can feel when people are angry because I'm feeling people as part of my job all the time. And even if they're trying, they're typing, you can't see them. You quite often don't even know their real name. And they'll be typing and they will be trying to type that they're nice. But before they even start typing, I feel a big whoosh of energy coming at me. Does it bother me? Not really. So it's the point of me feeling them is to know where they're at any moment, it's to know where, that's what aura reading is. That's what reading energy is. So I don't see any of that as a psychic attack. But if you look at the Facebook genre and you look at social media in general, people know when everybody else is pissed off, right? And so when somebody gets pissed off, you're going to get a sense inside yourself of not feeling too great about that. Whether you feel you're right, wrong, or otherwise, it's not a nice feeling, is it?
No, and that's what I feel people mistaken as the psychic attack. We all want to be accepted. We all want to be liked. So, and no matter how much we say, I don't care what anybody else thinks, we all really do. But we have to, when you're protecting yourself from the psychic attack is you have to decide what energy you're going to let in and what you're not going to let in. And I'm not going to let somebody attack me because they are having a problem with me and the way I see things, right? But as a psychic attack, I tell a lot of clients, I have a lot of clients that call, they're like, I have bad luck and I don't know if it's curse. And I'm like, well, first of all, let's change your wording, change your life. We're not going to use the term curse. We're not going to use the term bad luck because there's no such thing. I'm not going to tell you for $20 more, we're going to pray over this crystal and get rid of your bad juju. And that's and that's fear mongering. And I think that a lot of people do teach that. And it's not okay.
It's not okay. And again, I go back to the same teacher, and you may guess from this that I wasn't with her very long.
Yeah.
And she had got all of her students over a couple of, classes. So there would have been, because I know one lady who went to 3 separate lots of sessions. So she had 6 or 7 or 8 classes in each module thing. It was $20 each to go or whatever. And so as they got to the end of that, she was telling these students that there's a man in Christchurch, New Zealand, who you ring, you pay him $50, bearing in mind this is, we're heading up to 20 years ago, and $50 is substantial now, forget about then, and he will remove your curses, by the way. And
Wow.
this man would take a phone call from you, listen to your problem, and do that. Now, I personally knew at least 4 people that did that, and then there were all the people I didn't know, and this woman was fronting that. Now, I do recall a time where she stepped up when I saw her at a psychic fair years later, and she said, I felt really bad for doing that because I realized I'd been hoodwinked too. These are people who aren't in a position to teach to start with, right?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. And so we've got this thing going on. Now, I want to talk to you about, and so this is the other side of it. From an advisory side and a wisdom side, any person that's trying to achieve information who's spiritually developing is vulnerable to blaming externals for their own problems, correct? Because we see a lot of that.
Yes.
And curses, don't they buy into that? And saying spirit is doing it. Bad luck even is buying
Yes.
into that. There's no level of personal responsibility, which is probably the first step of any personal spiritual development, right?
Yes. Yes.
And what do you think go on.
Yes, I think that you really have to see your light and your darkness as well. When you're teaching, and you have to be accepting of not, we always hear people talk about teachers when they're teaching kids. All kids don't learn the same, and that's the same in the spiritual community as well. Not everybody learns the same. Not everybody sees the same. No, not everybody resonates. But I really do feel that some of these teachers are in it for, here, I'm going to charge this and we're going to do, this is how you're going to learn. And if you don't see it that way, and you'll have really honest students that are like, oh my gosh, I don't see anything. I don't see anything. And then there's panic. And then there's this feeling of being, discouraged. And I think there's enough for everybody. And I think that
goes back to, at the beginning of the show, and I said where a person is setting themselves up as a teacher, but really what they're doing is they're applying their own personal or skill set limitations and restrictions to other people. It shouldn't matter if a person does it differently. It shouldn't matter if a person's clairaudient and doesn't see something. That's fine. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So it's all down to that side of things. But that's a very valid point. And I had a client many years ago who came to me. She wanted to, because I taught meditation classes, and I still do a fair bit of that sort of thing. But I taught all of this I was doing in person with people. It wasn't online back then. And she came along to my meditation classes, and I was horrified to learn. She said, I've come to you because I'd gone to this lady who was a medium, and that's not picking on anybody, but that's, what a lot of psychics call themselves, whether that's what they are or not. It's the selling point, I suppose, from years back. It's a very English thing to call yourself a medium, whether you are or not. But anyway, she came to me, and a lady teaching her class meditation, she'd said to her, this lady had said to the teacher, every time I meditate, I need to know what's going on. Every time I meditate, I want to dribble. And then I come out of the meditation because I feel like I might dribble in front of everybody. She said, but the weird thing is that I meditate in other places or at home. It only happens to me when I'm here. The teacher turned around and said to her, oh, actually, you've got a dark negative energy right at the very center of your heart. That's why. What a horrible thing. I know.
Oh my gosh, that's scary.
But you get a lot of that sort of thing, because what that teacher is saying is, instead of going, I don't know, she had to make something up, right? And so that's pretty much what you see and hear a lot of. And that's when you hear explanations of these things, these far-reaching things, you're hearing some pretty way out to this day, and on shows I've listened to within the last few weeks, I still hear some pretty out there rubbish, and you can't help but go, hang on a minute, all you're doing is you are making this person feel bad because you can't explain something. Nobody minds if you say, I don't know. Nobody minds if you say, look, I'm not sure, but this is what I think it might be, as long as it's constructive and it isn't saying. I had a lady come to me, just so you'll know, she came and she actually learnt the vibration expansion technique, which is expensive. Well, it's not expensive, but it takes a year, right? And why she came to me was she had gone to a healer, quote unquote, who had told her she'd had cancer and she was getting it removed from her leg. It was in her leg. And this person had told her your heart and energy is all shriveled up and your chakras are like dried prunes, and that's why you will never get rid of cancer. This is a physical disease she's got, and this is a spiritual healer telling her that. So these are the things to really look out for. These are the bad things, and there are bad things that aren't necessarily spiritual. So we gave her energy therapy. I say we, it's the royal we. She went and had her surgeries, and she was just dynamite. To this day, this girl, I know her well because she's been a student who's now a practitioner. Now she's 7 years down the track, and she's never had a moment's problem since. She's clear, clean. You know how they test you for a couple of years afterwards and all of that.
Yes.
So no problem at all. But what a thing to say, just as I had another student come to me from Gisborne, and she was learning very early stages. She was on module 2, because this is energy therapy stuff, and she'd gone off to witness a traditional Māori healer with a woman with her teenage child. And this Māori healer had looked at the child, given her some kind of healing process. I didn't see it, so I don't know what it was. And then come back to the mother afterwards, and she said, there are spirits that are evil hanging around your daughter. They won't go away. So there's no way to fix her. She's just going to go down a deep, dark path, and she may die on that path. So she's told a 16-year-old's mother this piece of information. My student was so upset that she came bollocking down to me as quick as she could, which is on Skype because she's 7 hours away. And she said, what do I do? She said, I can't sit back and say nothing yet. I didn't have the confidence because I'm so new at it to say something. So I read the girl's aura, gave that to her, and off she ran to the mother, and it was much more practical, I've got to say. But the thing here is that, you know, we've got, as you say, people that are trying to give themselves a superior position when they're really out of their league. And it's clear they're out of their league. It's clear that they're not able to get the information needed. But what I really want to push down at the moment, because we still hear a lot about this, is what do you think of the term shadow people?
Oh my gosh. That's, I get really angry about that. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, is that everybody talks about these shadow people and how they're terrible and demonic and they're here to hurt us and, all these things, and it drives me nuts because I'm just speaking from my, again, I know we shouldn't talk from a personal, but my personal experience was every time I saw a shadow person, after that I've always received a feeling of love. I've received a knowing that it was somebody that I loved or cared for. It was coming to me from love. I feel shadow people are our loved ones that are muting light to be seen. They don't have a physical form anymore. So everybody's expecting, and I don't know if it's because of Hollywood or because of the fear mongers that we're talking about that try to teach people, you know, oh, you've got darkness in your heart, and then people think shadow people are bad. I always ask, I had one client that kept, oh my gosh, I see shadows all the time. And I said, well, what do you feel when you see them? I mean, have you moved out of your house? And she says, what? And I said, well, have you moved out of your house? And she's like, well, of course not. And I said, well, it seems to me if they were that bad and they were negative and they were out to hurt you, you would have moved out of your house by now because you see them all the time. And she's like, I mean, the look of, oh my gosh, you're right. Like this look of relief came over her face. And I'm like, somebody else told you that there's something they shouldn't be, and you're not feeling that, but you're apprehensive about it because you think you should.
Yeah.
So,
well,
you know, I don't think shadow people are bad. I think those are people that are seeing between the two worlds. They're seeing the veil's either thin or, which I don't even know if I like the term the veil either, but I don't know what else to call it. The curtain, none
of those. None of those. It's called ability, right? Ability, nothing more, nothing less. The less ability a person has, the more veil they're going to discuss. And I really see it that way. The interesting thing is that we talked already when you start psychic development, people start it in different ways. Now, I've had a number of students, and I myself have had only one experience of this, but when I was learning, I saw a scene in negative. And when I say in negative, it was like a negative photo. You know how you have the dark bits are light and the light bits are dark, no color, that sort of thing. It was my very first ever vision. And so I understood that I wasn't scared or worried about it and all the rest of it, but I understood, as you're developing something, clearly there's a different way of seeing. And our brain fills in the blanks. It doesn't mean they are there. And then as time went by, I started seeing things in full color, all the right thing for me, which is vitally important as an aura reader these days. But back then, we're talking straight out visions.
Right.
And when I looked at that, it wasn't the same as other visions or meditative visions that I had. This was a real life before the person did it. I actually saw a microlight in my mind's eye flying over, and it was black. I knew it was a microlight, and it was just a negative. That was all it was. And it was a quick flash that I saw. Half an hour easy, maybe an hour later, that's exactly what happened. And when I looked up, I saw that shape in the sky, but I saw it in color. It's exactly the same thing. Totally inconsequential, but it's the point of development. So if you are developing psychically, what you think of as shadow is very often just a lack of your ability or your skill yet, right? Yet. It's just like physically building up your body. It hurts to start with because you're not quite there yet. Not that you can't get there, not that you can't develop, but just not yet. And I've had a lot of students over the years when they start having visions that have these what I call negative experiences, negative as in negative photo, not negative bad. And I figure, that must be just a part of the process for some people, not everybody, but for some people. Now, the other thing that I used to get a whole lot, and this is where a lot of shadow people stuff comes from as well, is I would see movement out the corner of my eye, and let's face it, who hasn't done that a million times, right? And then you turn to look at it, and there's nothing there.
Yes.
And so when you see that, I can even explain why. This is the teacher in me going for it. The peripheral vision that we have sees movement. That means if you wave your hand backwards and forwards out of the corner of your eye, you'll actually see your 5 fingers, you'll see your hand moving. If you do the same thing in front of your eyes, actually you don't see movement. It has like a still photography, stop, start, so it blurs. So when you do that in front, it's just a blur. You know it's your hand. When you do it on the side, in actual fact, everybody can do this. Give it a go. You can see all fingers and you can see the movement in your hand is. So that's why your peripheral vision is so important for driving, because you see movement. Now, as you're developing subtle energies, you can also see energy movement, and you'll see it for most people out the corner of their eyes first. And it's the most common thing you hear. It's not good, it's not bad, and it's not even necessarily a dead person or a living person, but it's energy movement. So there we go. How's that?
I agree. I think that's a perfect way to put it. And I tell a lot of, when I've held classes, I tell everybody everything's energy. I said you have to quit thinking of everything not being a moving part. If you put a microscope on the table and you look at it, the table under the microscope, you'll see moving parts. Right. Everything is energy. Everything is moving. So we'll deal with connection. And we did a lot of fun stuff in that class because I made it fun. We made it something. And then people would say, oh my gosh, I saw this. What does it mean? And I would say, I have no freaking idea.
Yeah. And it should be exciting and fun, though, right?
And because they did see it differently than me. And I do feel, when you say about some of these people, they say the readers have to be careful how they word things. I agree with that 100%. I unfortunately have a very low threshold for tolerance of being when I'm doing a reading for somebody, and maybe I'm horrible when it comes to this, but when I'm doing a reading for somebody, I have a very low threshold for somebody that tries to control their reading or tries to tell me, no. And I've heard readers over the years, as well as teachers, change their answer to suit their students or their clients' needs. And
see, that I see as a skill set. Earlier when I said to you that's part of the advisory part of it, when I hear a reader do that, they're a bad reader right there because they can't impart difficult information. they now remove their ability and their position in a reading, which is the person who is the expert, who is the authority, if you like, and they can't now help that person. And so it's a natural thing, because even from a psychological perspective, when I get clients coming for hypnotherapy, they will try to control how I'm interpreting what they're going through. In other words, 9 times out of 10, that's a bit too much, that's not accurate. Probably about 7 times out of 10, when a person comes for hypnotherapy, the reason they say they are here isn't the reason they are here.
Right. I agree.
So we have a thing called a presenting issue, which is a psychological phenomena that's well known, where the person comes in and they tell you that it's whatever the first thing that comes into their mind. When it's a reader, the reason for that subterfuge changes, i.e., they really just want to ask you about love, but they get so slammed by it these days in so many shows, so many places. They're made to feel bad for asking that they go all around, you've seen this, I'm sure. They go all around the troops and check everything else out before they pop it out there sort of almost timidly saying, Anne, I'd like to know about love. And it's like, it's a natural question. It's a natural, nice thing to want to know about. And when a person is repeatedly asking about it, it means they're distressed about it. And it's the distress that is the thing that needs attention, not necessarily the question that they're asking. But
Absolutely.
I totally agree with you there. But there are a group of people, and this isn't about psychics today, everybody. This is about psychic development. But there are, and we will talk about this one day because I know Kathleen and I will have fun with it. There are psychic bullies out there, right? That's people that bully their psychic, I should say.
Yes.
And they're really just they're not really out to get information so much as they're the human troll type mentality, and you need to have fortitude. And then you've got people, because they can't see the information being given to them, that will deny it, prevaricate, even be dishonest to try and make the psychic sort of move into the zone that they want them to be in. But that's a whole different a game. The psychic development, though, it's more about, are you made to feel that you are learning something? Is it exciting? Is it invigorating you? Does it meet what you would like to be doing? For example, if a person wants to be a bit more spiritually oriented, they don't need to go and develop psychic skills. Let's put it that way. And I suppose the question becomes then, what's the best reason to develop psychic skills? What is the reason? And I can promise anybody that's listening that it's not for your own self, because you're going to get it wrong most of the time for yourself. Isn't that right?
Oh, yes.
No matter how good you get for other people. It's just like the nature of the beast, isn't it? I want a yes answer. Oh, look, I got one.
The spiritual in readers often have a huge spiritual resume of excuse the term, of shit. Oh my gosh, have we been through so much? Because we do have to experience to help people. And that's another thing with the teaching is you have to experience to help people. You can't give somebody advice without having experience. And that's true whether you're a reader or just being a good friend. How many of us have heard, oh, I know what you're going through. And you're like, oh my gosh, have you been through this too? And they're like, no.
Yeah, but even without that, if you just look at basic, forget this has got nothing to do with psychics really, but basic marketing, and I did marketing courses in 2000 and the millennium, but the reality of that is that they found that when a person has experienced something, there is some kind of energy. They didn't put it down to the way they didn't say it the way we would say it, let's put it that way,
right.
But there is an energy that's imparted that connects with the other person.
Yes.
And that is why things like, and the things that we researched in that marketing was actually Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, okay? There's some big name businesses out there that aren't about weight, but every single one of those super successes have come from a person this is what I did to take me from the place you're at that you don't like being in to get to the place I'm at where you want to be.
Yes.
And that's the same with any counselor, any clairvoyant, but you can't do it to a way where, my heart bleeds for you because you've gone through what I've gone through. You need to look at, this is what you need to do to get past where you are to the place you'd rather be, right?
Yes. I think as a clairvoyant or an energy worker or a medium, a reader. Obviously, there's some experiences that my clients have had that I have not had, but I have the experience of connecting with loved ones that have passed. So I take my experience and their experience, whether it's their grief or their need or their love or even their happiness of knowing that their loved one is coming through. So it's almost like taking more than one experience together. I can't do a reading without my clients.
No,
Obviously. So it is a transfer of energy, and it's a harmony of energy. It's just like a cohesive unit. It's just like being in a classroom, really. And when you're teaching people that, I say, when you're reading somebody's cards, because I always start with teaching people, what do you see in these cards? Find a deck, bring a deck with you to the class that speaks to you and resonates with you. And we start with that, and, they pair off. I always make sure that there's, like you said, your one teacher did 10 people in the class. I always make there's an even number so people can pair off and they can learn to read each other. I said, well, I got the impression by her eyebrows and the way she creased her eyebrows that I was wrong there. And I said, well, then why did you let ego step in? Because sometimes our facial expressions have nothing to do with the way what's resonating in our soul. As much as people want to say that it's always connected, it isn't. Sometimes
consternation alone can be just, I don't like what I'm hearing. It doesn't have to be that it's wrong, right?
Yes. Right.
We all know
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. And that's why I said there's parts of me that I'm guilty of, maybe not being the kindest reader when I have somebody that tries to control their reading and tell me I'm wrong, and they're getting the answer that I see, and I said, you have free will, you absolutely have the ability to change what I'm seeing, but I can't change what I'm being shown. So I on occasion will get a little short, and that kind of resonated with me tonight when you said that. I thought, that's something I'll have to work on. So even tonight on the show, I'm being taught something because I never thought of it that way. I just thought, well, you called for a reading and here it is. So sometimes, so I even learned something tonight. So I think that's another issue with this. When you're doing a lot of spiritual teachings, you're always learning as well. And I think that's a huge factor in it.
Yeah. And when you said before about, their experience that they had might not be one that you've had, that doesn't mean you haven't had the feeling. Now, when you read energy, and when in particular when I'm working energy therapy, which is helping people's body as much as anything else, for the most part, they come to me because they're not well or they've broken something. But when you're doing that, when you're feeling another person's energy, it doesn't matter if their experience wasn't the same as yours. Usually, we've got a set range of feelings that, as humans, we feel, and so the chances are pretty good if you've had a broad life of, as you say, shit. Right. Then if you've had that, then you've probably felt the way they feel, is the point I'm making. So there's the correspondence, not necessarily the exact experience, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's how you can empathize. Empathetic nature, if you like, which is every human being has empathy. I get really tired of hearing people say, I'm such an empath. Any human being is a sociopath.
That's what I was going to say. I agree. Yeah. I agree. Everybody's an empath. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the human condition, and we're sentient beings. And we want to look at science there. Let's look at science. Science calls humans sentient beings, and that means we have a sensory range that's always been accepted to be a bit larger and a bit broader than the general run-of-the-mill idea that we live in this 3D world. The only people I hear saying stuff like that are the so-called spiritual people. And all the rest of the people I know, they just take it for granted that they have intuition. They take it for granted that they pick up the occasional thing or get the occasional creepy feeling without going into this whole idea of how multi-dimensional living. They understand that you can sense something from somebody else, and that now and again that peaks, and sometimes it's kind of large and other times it's normal. And the kindest people we know aren't necessarily the most empathetic people we know. They're just more compassionate. That means they have an understanding of your circumstance. They don't have to have an understanding of how you feel about it.
Right. Well, and like I said, I guess I would sometimes come across as a cold reader because I tell people start saying, well, they've had a really rough go. And I said, well, everybody has a sad story.
Ooh, go you. I think
who doesn't?
Yeah. But the point that you're making there, though, comes back to you saying that they're trying to make you adjust your reading and information to suit them, correct?
Yes.
Just for those listening now, that's where this all started. Just
yes.
so as you know, she's not going to slam or beat you up if you want a reading.
No, and that's what I'm saying. It's just a lot of them will use the sympathy because I think we're taught that. Everything we do is by being taught. And I think we're taught at a young age. Listen, everybody comes together in sympathy. Everybody comes together in sadness. If the sadder the story the better the story is, the more sympathy and the more, compassion you're going to get, the more people are going to stand behind you. And I think we're taught that. So I tell people, I said, well, everybody has a sad story. So here's the hand that was dealt you. What are you going to do with it? What are we going to learn from it? What are we going to use with it? There was one time I was on another show and everybody was like, what was one of your defining moments that made you feel really low or, you knew you weren't a really good person all the time? And I said out loud, I said, my second marriage. And they all started laughing and thought it was a joke. And I said, it's not a joke. I was a horrendous wife in my second marriage. I said, we were so intent on proving each other wrong, we literally walked ourselves out of what could have been a great marriage.
And that's interesting as well, because I think one of the most profound, let me say this correctly, one of the most profound, that's not quite right either. Hang on, give me a minute. It's not often I have to search for words, guys. And it's not that this could sound wrong. I just want it to sound as good as it's going to be. I want it to sound as good as my concept of it is. It's one of the most profound, I don't want to say the word gift, it's one of the most profound human traits is to be self-aware.
Yes.
And I call it profound because it's not good or bad, but without self-awareness, you do not grow. We all know that. You talk to somebody who's in denial, it's like banging your head against a brick wall. But that's not criticizing that person. It's that understanding that they can't envision, they can't imagine, they can't hear or accept a different possibility. So they're quite difficult to talk to, and you have to find your way around. But it's like manipulators as well. We've kind of got off subject, but manipulators as well. When a person's trying to manipulate you as a reader, Kathleen, then what they're saying is, I don't want to hear anything bad. And they're trying to do anything they can to direct you somewhere else so that they don't hear. And they will do that in your relationship. So you know what they're doing to you. So here's your little insight right there. You know that what they're doing to you to get you in the frame is what they're doing to the people around them, and is a big part of why they're in the position they're in. Not the cause of it, but why they feel the way they do, why they're disabled, why they can't find their way out of it. So when a person's treating you in that way, then they're saying, as a person that's manipulating or trying to manipulate this conversation, or as a person who's trying to manipulate how you see things, I'm saying I can't handle rejection. I can't handle being told no. I haven't been taught that. I haven't learned how to accept things not going my way.
Well, and that's true. Or I don't want to be vulnerable. I think people know usually within the first 5 minutes if they're with a really good reader. I also think that I might not be the reader for everybody, so sometimes we don't connect. There are times where you don't connect. One of the things I do when I do some classes is I sit everybody down, and everybody has to come with a notebook and a pen. I'm old fashioned that way. It's not your electronics. All the electronics get turned off when we do these classes. And I said, I want you to take 2 pieces of paper out, and I want you to write down your best memory and I want you to write down your worst memory. And that's the first exercise that I have them do. And when everybody does that, the first thing I always get their worst memory in great detail. It's at least a paragraph or a page long, if not longer. And their best memory is handed in second, and it's usually no more than a paragraph long.
Right.
And it's downplayed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is your best memory so short? So it's all about retraining. And I'm like, let's retrain your brain there. I asked you first what your best memory was, and you went right to your worst memory. You answered your worst memory first, your best memory second, and the order I asked was your best memory and then your worst. And you gave me great detail of your worst memory, and then their best memory, they'll downplay their accomplishment. Like, my best memory is when I bought my first car with my own money, but it was the ugliest car on the face of the earth. Well, why was it ugly? Well, it wasn't the Mustang that my friend had. There was always a comparison of how it wasn't good enough. And I'm like, you really need to start changing that. And that's the first thing I do in my classes.
Right. And negative gearing is what you're talking about, right? Really, mm-hmm. It's a negative gearing, and we're taught that as children by being ignored until we're bad, really.
Yes.
And I don't mean that as a bad parenting style either. It's just something people do. Your kids are happy, they're quiet, they're keeping themselves entertained. Let's not disrupt that, right? And then as soon as they're doing something bad, they get all the intense attention. Because I've taught art a lot in the past, especially when I was in Australia. There was, can't remember her first name, but her surname was Connolly, and she brought out a book on the psychology of art. And one of the first things they found was that children stopped drawing when they were 12. They still do. Because the parents, not so much teachers now, certainly not here anyway, they've been taught differently now, but parents start noticing the things that are wrong with their drawings once they get to a certain age. So when you start drawing, everything goes. Pretty colours, funny little legs, big arms, little legs. Later on, even though the parent is laughing and not being mean about it, they say, oh, look at that leg, or look, there's 3 legs. They are intrinsically critical without trying to be. And so the kid stops drawing. Then, because we have a natural ability to draw, by the way. Everybody should take that on board from Dorothy. And then, of course, you get to adulthood and you decide you want to draw, and you can't draw for love nor money, and that's what adults say, I can't draw. What they are not recognizing is that actually you can draw, it's just you haven't done it since you were 12, and your expectation and skill level is a 12-year-old's.
Yes.
Your expectation is that it has to be perfect. And so the way to get past that is, in fact, a very genuine and seriously taught method of turning the picture you're drawing upside down so that you're not trying to recognize and draw it in completeness, and that you're just drawing the lines, which is what I do. I just draw lines, and in the end it looks like a picture if I'm lucky. If I'm lucky, it looks like a picture when I'm finished with it. So it's the same concept, with spiritual, or I should say psychic development, because we're not really talking about spiritual development. Spiritual development is very personal, and when you learn spiritual development, you're learning how to be a better you. Whichever way you take that and wherever you go for that, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for woohoo experiences, right? If I'm giving somebody a higher self meditation, at the end of that, they should be feeling like they're firing on 8 cylinders, that everything's perfect, they're fueled up, the tank's ready to go. And then over a couple of weeks after that, they should get these aha, wonderful moments of self-recognition, of self-development, of self-achievement, all of those wonderful feelings that go with that. Whereas when you're talking psychic development, you are specifically talking a skill set, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think about, we get a lot of people talking about going through big, huge rituals, and I still see people today that do it, that say, well, I can't do this for you unless I sit for half an hour and meditate and clear my mind and get rid of all the bosh and stuff that's going on in there. Or how often we hear somebody say, my mind's just not in the right place at the moment, I can't do readings, or I can't get information for you. What do you think about that kind of thing when it comes to developing? If a person's trying to develop psychically, they need to learn, right, how to come past that. If you want to make it a profession, if you want to read for others, even as a hobby, if you want to read for others, you need to set yourself aside in there somewhere. So what do you say to a person who says, those kind of things? I can't right now because my head's not in the right place or...
Well, there's a few things. I think that there's a lot, especially like I said, this has become very mainstream. I've heard a lot the last 3 to 5 years. I want to do what you do. I want to get paid like you do. I want to do what you do. And people don't realize how much time, how much effort, how exhausting it can be. And I'm like, well, you absolutely, if you feel you have the ability to do it, absolutely. And do you suggest I take classes? Do you think I should do this? What do you think I should do? And that's where I get a little bit of a mental block with it, because I don't necessarily know if I can teach them. I always offer, but I don't know what they're going to be stronger at. Like some people I know right away, I'm like, you're definitely a healer. You should probably work with energy. You should probably work with healing. Some people are medical intuitives. I don't see anything for medical. So I couldn't even begin to teach somebody something like that because I don't know. So I think that the first thing to do is to get back to basics. They've got to figure out what their strong point are. Is it medium? Is it healer? Is it energy? Is it clairvoyance? Is it, medical? Is it, you have to get down to what resonates with you. And then you go from there. I think that I really don't know how to answer that question because it's such a broad question. I think that...
It made it a great question, the fact that you say you don't know how to answer it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because for me, I would put it into the bracket of start with whatever blows your skirt up is my favorite line. You start,
right.
Go find a class, because we have agreed, right, completely that the key to psychic development and skill development is practice. And one of the best ways to practice actually is to go into a class environment or to work with somebody in such a way that they're stretching you, they're pushing you, they're asking you to try harder. And that's how you develop, right? They ask you for information. When I have students learning the vibration expansion technique, I actually give them names and say, I want you to give me information on those names. And there'll always be people I know very well, so I know if the information's right or wrong.
Right.
That kind of thing. Now, it's not about anything except getting them to try and getting them to practice. And
yes.
so that practice creates that environment. It doesn't matter if they want to be a medical intuitive, and I do a lot of that kind of work. That developed as I went on. The key is, though, that you couldn't do that without a clairvoyant or an energy understanding to start with.
Correct.
Right?
And that's what I mean. It's about development. Like I said, I started out more as an animal and earth communicator.
Right.
Nature. Because that's what I was comfortable with. I didn't feel like I was being judged by it. I didn't feel like I was, so that's where I started with mine. But yes, absolutely. You have to have some natural ability. If you don't have natural ability, it's like you said with the drawings. Not everybody can draw.
Well, I said the opposite. I said everybody can draw. They just haven't done it since they were 12, So
sure, but
it doesn't mean they'll be an artist. I get it.
Right. That's what
I was being mean to you, Kathleen. Pure and simple. I was just being mean.
I'm a horrible artist.
Well, that's practice again. So what my point really there is that energetic understandings, how you direct that, usually doesn't come at the beginning. Does it?
Yes.
What happens at the beginning, though, is if you take a class where you're practicing, say it's a meditation class, then you'll develop that wonderful sense of getting visions, having experiences, being open to information, coming in different ways. If you decide that you want to read auras, or you may not later, but you go and auras are exciting, so you go and do aura reading classes. That's what I'm trying to say, is you start with the things that really draw you. Don't worry about how you're going to end up. Start with what you like right now, develop skills, have the fun, and the next thing you do will be in line with the next part of your journey, as opposed to waiting for an outcome and deciding what you'd be. Believe it or not, the first classes I took were mediumship classes, and while I do mediumship on a one-on-one basis, it's a side event for me. It's not the main event at all. The aura reading came and became the energy reading, the energy therapy became the big deal for me. And in fact, reading people's bodies, that kind of stuff was huge, still is huge. And so it's where you start doesn't always affect where you end up. But what I got out of that was actually we did guidance work, and I went and learned about guides, and I did meditations and invited guides in. You know what I mean? It was fun. It was absolutely fun. But the fun of that was that it developed skills that I use in different ways now, or that I've built on since, and they've become even more prevalent. So we're back to that. I was practicing while I was having fun. I was practicing being open to subtle energy fields. I was practicing seeing people that weren't in front of me, that kind of thing. And how you take that on board. If you want to become a medium as time goes by, if grief is your thing, if being a medium is your thing, then you'll actually naturally gravitate to using it in the way that reflects your personality and the things that you like and the type of reader you want to be. If you want to narrow that down to a specialist area, or like me, I love all of it, and so I play with all of it quite seriously for the most part and use it all. I'm that person. Use it all. Yep. So it's all about that, allowing that to develop. But the key still comes down to the word, put yourself in a position where you can practice that and practice it a lot in a very controlled environment where you have somebody, and this is why I do like classes, because that's how I did learn. If you get a bad teacher, a person who can't teach you, who doesn't know their stuff and tries to intimidate you, I actually think there's value in learning that as well,
Oh, I agree. Yeah. If I had based my ability and what I do for, this is my as well, based on what some of my teachers that I had, which were later after I'd already been doing it professionally. It's only been in the last few years I've met people that have been willing to share their knowledge, and it's become people are much more open with sharing their knowledge rather than controlling it. I think we are in a spiritual revolution, so we are teaching each other, and there's more, like I said, there's hokey people in the industry, and then there's really good readers in the community. Yeah. So we're weeding out. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means, not everybody's,
some of them are rip-offs.
Right, absolutely. But their ability might be sales. Maybe you should focus all the energy you're focusing on. I had a really, really bad experience one time that almost shied me away from this. I actually considered retiring and taking a couple other jobs from it, because I had such a bad experience with one reader who asked me, she said, when were you given your ability? And I said, it's always been there. I don't ever remember it not being there. And she says, well, did you ever have a near-death experience? And I said, not that I know of. I mean, I had a horrendous head injury when I was a child. And she says, well, that's it. That's when you were given your gift. And I said, no, I remember it before that.
Yeah, but that was a big thing too. For years, there were readers out there, teachers out there who were saying, "Oh, usually you'll get it because you've had a near-death experience or a bang on the head, basically." And I thought, well, geez, I've had so many bangs on my head, I should have knocked some sense into myself. It's like this bizarre idea, because again, they couldn't just say, there's a developmental process here. Something probably has happened in your life that makes you want to help people in this way, and it's drawn you towards this as a profession. For me, I experienced loss. I was doing the platform work. Do you guys call it platform work? I don't know if you do or not. It's a very British term.
Yeah, that's what they called it in Canada, but not here in the States. They don't call it that.
I was doing platform work for about 2 years before I moved into other types of work. I went round and stood on a stage in front of whole piles of people and did mediumship, nothing else, just mediumship. And I could do a whole lot more even then, and that's why I stopped, because I felt it was very restrictive, and it was the same with the aura camera. The reason I got rid of that was the way I was reading auras got so broad compared to what the camera allowed me to do, that it became restrictive. And that's what's pushed me each step into a different style of doing something, has been what I was doing became restrictive. It didn't allow me to be fully expressive, which of course we can all tell would be a real crime, right?
Yes.
Don't, Dorothy, because everything I do is expressive one way or another. My face is really mobile. I paint, I write, I cook, right?
Yes.
I talk heaps. My favorite saying these days is, why say in 100 words what you can say in 3,000?
Absolutely. And I see there's so much creativity that comes from your energy work too. I really feel a lot of energy workers have so many creative outlets. Like your paintings are amazing, and Renee Richards does the paintings too. I don't have that ability. Like what I've tried, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's not even about self-depreciation. It doesn't resonate with me when I'm doing it. But I really, really see it. I have a good friend who does spirit paintings with blended art pens. She does blended paintings. They're phenomenal. They're all spirit guides, and she outlines your spirit guides, and they're gorgeous. But to most people, when you first look at them, you think you're looking at like the ink blot with a bunch of different colors. It's just not black and white. It's amazing to me, and I do think that you're right. You have to be able to, you change. Sometimes it's constant. It's like doing a dance. Sometimes the steps are the same, and then they turn into something. You go from doing the waltz to interpretive dance. Sometimes
well, see, when I was
really
younger, I couldn't draw and I couldn't paint. Just so as we're clear, I got pregnant with my daughter when I was 33, and I was absolutely freaking because the first time in my life I would finish work. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to be bored, blah, blah, blah. And my whole mind just went back over this whole idea of finishing work, because I'd said, 33, I have my daughter, I want to be there for her, I don't want to palm her off and all the rest of it. And I've got an older child from many years before, which sort of worked that way. Anyway, I get to about 8 months pregnant, and I've got 4 weeks before this child is born, and I've got maybe 4 days before I have to finish work, and I wander off down the road and see this beautiful group of paintings in a local shopping mall, and this man's painting them. And he's got like 20 paintings, maybe more, all around him, and he's doing them for a charity, and he's doing what I now understand to be formula painting. He'd go around with his yellow, then he'd go around with his blue, and it was all spatula work and all the rest of it. And yet when he ended them, the paintings were pretty good. I never ever thought they were brilliant, but I thought, well, they're pretty good. And I couldn't understand how he knew where to put the yellow. Do you know what I mean? How does he know where to put that? Right. There was no drawings. There was none of that stuff. Anyway, I was walking home, and there's a school supply place that didn't sell to the public with a big sign out on the concrete path that says, we're open to the public, we're selling out, we're moving, and we're just getting rid of a whole pile of school stock. So I went in and I bought 6 paints, and I bought a little book called Colour and How to Use It. I couldn't draw. I just thought, well, it's worth a go. And so when I went through the 6 exercises, and honestly, it took me hours to do any drawing, like even the mountaintops. It would take me hours because they would always just not be right, and so on and so on. And then I learned actually to paint before I learned to draw. Now, the reason I'm saying all of this is the very same reason I said, I started out as a medium essentially, and then I switched horses. The energy therapy just drove through everything, the aura reading. The skills for that were possibly intrinsic. They were probably better. But it's also what was available at the time. There was everybody taught mediumship. Nobody taught you to read auras, and I didn't have anybody teach me to read auras. That was something that I developed over time. But when it came to the artwork, that's why I talk about the 12 years. My drawing was shocking. My confidence in the idea of drawing was shocking. But over a period of time, because I had the time, I had a baby and nothing else to do really. I found that even though it was really still hard work, I wasn't doing too bad a job. And so I quite literally taught myself to be the artist that I am today. And of course now it's 21 years later. So we're in a position where people can go ooh and ah, but it didn't happen. And it wasn't like I could draw, some kids draw from 4 years old and they never stop. They're just amazing. I'm self-taught in that respect. And then it wasn't until I went to Australia, I did a few courses. I did the university course over there. And all that did was it gave me, here we go, we're talking about classes again, technical skill. I had done as much as I could knowing nothing. And so I went to the University of Brisbane and did a distance education on art and drawing. So that's when I did my drawing. I was already able to paint and I needed to learn how to draw. so that I could do things that I wanted to do that were quite complex. I wanted to do, and I ended up going into portraiture, and the teacher there told me, don't even do portraits. Don't do people. You're not good at them.
Wow.
So it's an interesting thing. Now, I didn't get stubborn on it and decide I wanted to do people. I'm a people person when it comes to the word expression, when it comes to me doing readings. All of that stuff is about other people. How they look is a fascination for me. I just love looking at people. I'm always a people watcher. So when I look backwards, I can see all of the little elements of myself that turned me into the type of practitioner that I am today. Yeah? And
Yes.
I think anybody could do it in retrospect. You look back and you go, well, actually, this resonates with me because I want people to feel better. Therefore, being a medium helps people feel better because they're struggling with grief. Do you follow? That kind of thing.
Yes.
So we will all, doesn't matter whether we're looking at psychic development or a regular job or a hobby, we'll all radiate essentially and be good at the things we like. Not everybody wants to draw. Not everybody wants to be a psychic, that kind of thing.
Yes.
But the truth is that we can learn anything we want to learn, and I think that's really important because I do get asked like you a lot where people say, can I learn this? Is it a gift? That word gift I don't like either because it's not. And I always go, well, I didn't start till I was in my late 30s, early 40s before I even started any of this. I wasn't even a believer before that in any of this. I might have had one or two scary moments. When I was 13, 14, I had this I stopped sleeping on my back because I started getting the sense that I would be hitting the ceiling. I'd be laying there getting ready to drift off to sleep, and I would actually freak out and think, I'm going to hit the ceiling, and suddenly I would sort of drop back. And that happened again and again and again. In the end, I refused to sleep on my back. I slept on my stomach until I was too pregnant to sleep on my stomach. So experiences that happen that freak you out don't mean they're bad experiences. That's what I would like to give to anybody that's into psychic development, that's starting the journey.
Yes.
And what do you think would be a good motive for somebody to develop psychically? What do you think that the reasoning would be for apart from spiritual development? So we've already established that two separate things. Spiritual development is personal betterment.
Right.
Psychic development is skills. So what do you think a person would want? Because I know, I get people asking me all the time. They'll come and look at, I've got a range of programs, and they will say, what should I do? Should I do this or this or this? And I always say, well, firstly, you decide what you want to achieve. Do you want to be into spiritual development, in which case we look over here? Do you want to be a psychic, in which case we look over here,
Right. And what do you want to do with it? It's what, like one lady said to me the other day, she goes, I want to do what you do. And I said, well, what is it that you think I do? And she's like, I want to see people from the other side. I want to hang with them. I want to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm not going to a party every day. You know that, right?
Yeah, well, I think that at the very early stage, though, that's why people come to shows like ours, not so much these days, but that's why they want to spend time with you. That's why I could fill a hall with 40, 50, 60 people in a fairly small environment, yes. As in, I live in the middle of nowhere, and it's because they want to be near somebody that does what we do because it uplifts them or it feels funky, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I feel that when you're learning, we have a lot of people that, like you said at the beginning of all this, you have to be careful what you're letting in, and you're not going to, Rome wasn't built in a night and a day.
No, it's right.
Night and a day, and people expect, oh, okay, now I read, I bought a tarot deck and I gave some people some advice, so now I'm ready to hang a sign up and take money for it, and
it's far too much of that.
Yeah. There's years and years of developing it. I do feel that the first thing you should do is to help with the spiritual grounding for yourself. It's to get what you need out of it first, and that's grounding, feeling confident, feeling like you're connected. Sometimes that's through meditation. What's your meditation? Is your meditation music? Is it yoga? Is it cooking? Is it painting? Is it walking? There's a lot of different ways to meditate, but there's something that you need to do. I hate to use the term ritualistic, but or something that you do routine or ritual every day that helps you get centered and grounded and open that up. Take that time. Too many people are busy. We have so much soul clutter, and they want to learn all this because it's so cool and they're into it, but they don't want to quiet their ego chatter or their soul clutter to do it. You have to set your time aside to connect with spirit and connect with energy. And I think that's the first thing you have to teach yourself. And that might be putting 10 minutes on the calendar every morning or every day for yourself, where you're 10 minutes of quiet music with no, your phone not being on and your kids not saying mom, 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 and all of that stuff. I think that's the first step to opening that up.
I think there's a point where you need to be a student, right?
Yes.
You can't
absolutely.
be a teacher before having first been a student. And I think if you've got a good teacher, the best thing about that is, without, making people feel bad about their skills, etc., a person does need to know when they're not ready yet, when they're not good enough, if you like, where their information isn't clear enough, or if their interpretive skills aren't developed enough. So it's looking at, that's what learning is. Learning is taking it to the next level, and knowing that there's a person there that's not going to say it to hurt you, upset you, or put you down, or because they're competing with you. But just like when you go and get a university degree, just like when you go and get a school qualification for anything, there's a person there that says, yes, you've put in the effort, you're showing promise, you're at this level now, go off into the world. And now you gain experience without actually doing damage to others because you didn't know enough to start with.
Well, that's true, and people don't look at that. They're like, oh, I want to be psychic, so I'm going to learn overnight. And you're right. If people are, we talked about it earlier, if you're a surgeon or you're in business or you're in HR or you're in advertising or marketing, you get your degree. You go for a certain amount of time. You're learning all that. Why would this be any different? And that's what people look at this as they say it's a gift, and then they separate you, but then at the same time they're like, but your time isn't worth money, and it's not worthy of me giving, myself 2 or 3 years or years to learn it. And it's like anything, you have to practice and you have to constantly be evolving in it. Doctors that learned 40 years ago are still learning new things today because medical technology is evolving. This is the same thing. The same thing happens.
Because it's become more mainstream too, there's a deeper level of commitment to accuracy, I think. From 20 years ago even, you can see the difference. You could get away with, not me personally, but psychics got away with a lot of crap, over the years. And we're now not there any longer. We're there where people are very discerning. They want exactitude. They want integrity. If we want a mainstream industry, we need to offer people that are professionals, not people that are gifted per se, There's a whole different genre around that, and there's a whole different expectation. It is mainstream, more mainstream than it's ever been before, but there is that also, that skepticism that doesn't come because people don't believe in the skills, but the amount of fakers out there that make it a little bit more difficult, or people that are really just not up to the game. There was a man, I don't know, have you heard of emotional freedom technique, EFT, the tapping technique?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I have a friend in Canada that does it, and she told me it has to do with hypnosis and stuff. I don't understand how it works.
Well, it does come from hypnosis. So, it's a technique that's been around a lot longer than EFT. But the man who developed it is a psychologist. He has a psychiatric qualification. He started in psychology. He's got a master's in human behavioral therapies. He's a very educated man when it comes to the psyche. And, of course, he's a master hypnotherapist as well. So you put all of these things together, and then he developed his website and he trained a few masters. I know one of them, and he had something like, I think, only 8 what he called masters of EFT in the world. Now, every one of those that I do know of have all got human behavioral sciences behind them. They've got big qualifications, and they just didn't want to be, quote unquote, tarnished with the brush of hypnotherapy, which, of course, in
Oh, I think I lost you. Okay. Well, I don't know. Can anybody else hear Dorothy, or is it just I that cannot hear her? Okay, so it's all of us. Okay, so while she's refreshing, I think that we all have ways that we can develop our spiritual sense of self and also our ability to tap into our natural connection to the what people would call the other side or energy field that's around us. And one of the things I'd strongly suggest is I think everybody should get a tarot deck that talks to them or something like that where they can practice with them, write down meanings. I don't personally use the books. And when I do teach classes, I tell people get rid of the books, and write down your interpretation of each card, and then, add 2 cards and then do the interpretation of them together and write them down. So you have this big journal, but eventually you are teaching yourself how to tap into your intuition and how the sight of a picture can bring images or bring feelings or bring you into that. That's why cards were so important, and a lot of people used them in the beginning. And I think that's a really good way to start, is to use cards and to write down what you feel the meanings are, and then start with one. Each card you'll do a meaning, and you take 10 or 20 minutes a day to do it. Then you add 2 cards and see if the cards together what you get the meaning. Then add 3 cards and do it, and teach yourself how to read what those images mean to you. And I think that's why art invokes so much in people, is because people will see something and they'll interpret to you. It's when you go to an art gallery with somebody and they both look at the same picture, their interpretation, both of them have separate interpretations to what they feel the artist is trying to do. And sometimes it's the same, but that's why I think art and pictures and cards are really good at helping develop your spiritual sense of self, and also helping develop your reading abilities or connection to spirit, because like you said, art invokes a lot in a lot of people. So I think that's a good way to start. And that's one of the things that I do teach in my classes, is I tell everybody to bring a tarot deck that they connect with. If they go to the store, even if they shop online, or if they want to make their own. I had one lady who brought, a regular deck of cards. She goes, I don't know why I feel I'm really connected to the deck of cards. Well, then we went over the history of how the deck of cards, occurred and why they were. They're actually a tarot deck that was being hidden. So they could actually do their readings and not be persecuted or hung or murdered or anything like that. And she was fascinated by that history. So I always suggest that's a really good way to start learning on your own without a teacher being present, is to get a tarot deck and to start interpreting what you feel when you look at the pictures, and then add 2 or 3 cards and what you feel with those together, and so forth and so on. Do we have Dorothy back?
Skills. That's practicing skills, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
It's exactly what that is. And I've always favoured psychometry as well as cards, picture reading cards. Really, we used to do a lot of anonymous work, and I still am there. Online, it's easier to do the anonymous thing, but we would get everybody to put their jewelry or whatever into a basket out in a different area, and then I'd bring them in later when we were doing that section of the training, and then you'd take everything that wasn't yours, anything that wasn't yours basically, and then you'd read it. And by not knowing who you were reading for in a class environment, let's face it, if you take the ring off that person, you've now had a certain amount of interactions, but this way would make sure that there was that anonymity there. And the same with the cards, that the cards would be drawn. You'd look at your card, put it back in the plot, and then everybody else would draw one of those cards so they wouldn't know who they were reading for. And from the picture perspective, the interesting thing is you could do that 3 times and one card could come up a couple of times, but because a different person has drawn it, the interpretation or whatever stuck out on that picture, whatever sort of stood out, was often quite different, depending, not just because the person reading it's seeing it differently, but because you're reading for the person who drew it. And I'm always very strong on that if you're going to undertake any reading process, if you're going to try and read a person, that your focus needs to be 100% on them so that you're getting the information that is relevant to them, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes. Now, we've gone massively over. I must have to get back to the EFT thing another time. But thank you so much, Kathleen. Everybody can get in touch with Kathleen, Kathleen-Moore, Psychic Medium. She is not my guest. We are co-hosts, just so you get it clear. And right, we are equals. And thank you, everybody that's come and for coming, and for anybody that's listening into the archives. Next show is in a fortnight. That is not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. And we're going to do a show called Talking to the Dead. And if you want to have a reading, call into the show. And we will talk about the vagaries, the difficulties, the challenges, and the pleasures that are involved in a mediumship. So that's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Kathleen. And it's goodbye from me and...
Thank you, and goodbye, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for coming by, everybody. I had a great time. It was a wonderful time.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.